there's anything roaming around in here. Oh, got him. Big fish. Big fish. He came up and whacked that jig. Oh my goodness. That is a Rainbow Lake jig bass. Look at that. Folks, I'm telling you. Tell me they don't look like footballs here, huh? Look at the size, look at the snub nose on that baby. We call that a snub nose bass. Look at that fish. All right, buddy. Boy, you were aggressive, weren't you? Folks, today we're at Rainbow Lake, one of my favorite all-time lakes right next to where I live, and I love it. This lake has so much to offer. I've learned a lot about my fishing here. I used to come here as a kid, and that's all I did was fish this lake. And had a lot of bass club tournaments here and had a lot of fun on them. But you know, when the bass down below on the lower lakes at Roosevelt, Lake Pleasant, Havasu, when they're done spawning, then the fish up here start spawning. So I kind of get the double whammy it a little bit, and I love that. Today, I'm running around just kind of poking around looking, and what I wanted to see was if the fish were starting to roam around and move up a little bit. But the other thing I wanted to do was try out my new jig, and it's made by Spinnerbaits, and it's a nice little flipping jig. I love it. But there are a few little jig tricks I want to tell you about. But first I'll tell you about the equipment I like to use with a jig. I like a heavy action. I'm using the Elite Series type hand rod. It's a 7-footer, heavy action, real heavy action rod. Okay, Johnny Moore's Signature Series reel, 17-pound test line, because I'm getting it in these weeds and under docks and things like that. There's a ton of docks on this lake, but and we've hit a few of them already. Nothing really going on yet. The water's still not very clear. It's kind of stained. It's clear in some areas, but pretty much stained all over. First part of the year, before those weeds really start coming up, a jig's a lot of fun to throw, and just throw it out there and let it fall. But it's an awesome jig. It's a 5/8 ounce jig I'm throwing, a flipping jig. And of course, the little tricks of the trade that I like to do with a jig first and foremost is I'm using a little chigger craw on the end of it, as you can see. And then one thing that's very important with a jig like this is to spread the weed guard out. Now, when you spread the weed guard out, and a lot of guys just leave it straight, but I like to spread it out. That way when the jig falls, if it rolls on a rock or something, it'll actually keep the hook from hooking up on the rock. So you can see how it does it there. It kind of just spreads across where the hook is not exposed, and they got a good weed guard on these jigs. And I'll tell you what, we'll have a lot of fun with this particular jig. The funny part about this lake, I really don't like to fish it after June because it gets so weeded up and you're pulling moss out. But if you're a frog fisherman, you like that kind of stuff, this would be the lake to come to without a doubt, because that's frog season. Now remember, we don't have shad in these lakes. It's crawdads, bluegill, trout, baby bass, and then of course you have frogs, you know, things like that. So you got to think a little differently up here. Something else a lot of folks tend to do when they come up to the White Mountains to fish for bass, and especially if you're a drop shotter like I am, is they like to try to find those deep fish. And I'll tell you what, fishing here my whole life, the one thing I have found about these fish, whether they're biting or not biting, they're all shallow. They'll hide up underneath these weeds, underneath the reeds. These reeds will actually start turning green here soon. And but they'll hide up underneath the weed patches and the reeds and stuff, and they'll just sit there and do nothing. I mean, a great thing to throw out here is a Cinco, a weightless lizard, things like that. And I grew up throwing a weightless lizard. That's about all I used to throw out here and catch a lot of fish on it, just a little 4-inch weightless lizard. So, and jigs are awesome this time of year before the weeds come up, because here in the next month or so, you're gonna be, every time you throw a jig out there, you're gonna be pulling back weeds. So, you know, you gotta really make your cast precise into some of the bare spots where you don't have a ton of weeds, marsh, and it's marshy stuff, you know. So we're gonna try to go around and see if we can't catch some jig fish on this Persuader jig. And I'll tell you what, it's an awesome little jig. I love this jig. I'm throwing more of a green pumpkin color. It's got the green flake in it, which makes it, you know, awesome for up here. These crawdads up here have a little green tinge to them. So once in a while, you'll see some with the little orange pinchers, and you can change things up and dye your pinchers orange. But right now I'm going more with a green pumpkin type look and see what we can't catch. But that was a nice fish right there. And believe it or not, that's kind of the standard a lot of times here on this lake. These fish look like footballs. They're really big. There's plenty of food in here for them with the crawdads and what they have for forage. So it's pretty awesome fishery. I love this lake, I really do. It's one of my favorites. Let's see if we can't catch some up, huh? Got it. Yeah, big old jig fish. That's what I'm talking about, son. Come on, little buck bass. Look at his jaw. This is a fish that's been caught before and somebody didn't, when he was a baby or something. Get that, you know you got the right color when you get him in there like that. Look at that. Now look at that fish's jaw. It's from not, split wide open. Evidently as a baby somebody caught it and didn't do it right or what. But there you go, buddy. Jigs are a lot of fun to throw. I ended up going to changing the jig color just a little bit because that last fish that I caught, I noticed that it had a little bit of crawdad, spitting a little bit of crawdad out with a little orange. I'll tell you what, up here in the White Mountains, there's a lot of crawdads up here that have a lot of orange in them. And so I'll flip over. This has got a little copper in it. This doesn't have the E-chip in it, but it's still a persuader jig. And what I love about this jig is if you look at the bottom of it, it's got a flat bottom on it. So when it sits, it kind of sits up like this. And look, I'm missing the little pincher, but it kind of sits up like this and it puts the crawdad, puts the jig and the craw in a stance like a protective mode, striking mode or whatever for the crawdad. And I'll tell you what, it just kind of sits straight up like that. Bass can't stand it. And I saw that fish swimming around that rock right there. And what's really cool about Rainbow Lake is it's got, you can fish dirty water, but when it gets clear, calm water like this, like what we have, I can actually see the rocks get up in shallow water. We caught that fish out of less than 2 foot of water. You can see him swimming around. Sight fishing does not always mean that you're bed fishing. It can mean you see roamers and you throw up in front of them, or if you see them hanging out around someplace, you stop. I love having the power poles. Without the power poles, it's hard to do this kind of shallow fishing and have fun doing it because you're constantly on your trolling motor. You're spooking the fish. That fish didn't even know we were there. I positioned the boat in a perfect position to where I could throw out there and watch him swimming around the rock or whatever, and threw that jig out there and he went right after it. But that is fun. That's a lot of fun. I'll put a new little deal on there. This is a smaller type jig, little 3/8 ounce, but it gets the job done. It's a lot of fun to throw. Let me change this out and see if we can't catch us up another one. I'll tell you something, over the years of doing the fishing show, we've had a lot of people that email me with questions, and we're gonna go through a few of those today too here on the show. And maybe we can answer a few of them for you, and if there's any that you might be curious, that you might want to have asked me over the years, outside of were the fish biting at a certain lake, we'll try to go over a few of those questions and answers with you today. One of the big questions I get all the time is, do the white craws work when you're not bed fishing? The answer is yeah, they'll work, but I would rather go with a more natural color if I'm just casting out there and I'm kind of easing it back. And the reason why is because when I'm using a white craw on a bed, the fish isn't in a feeding mode, it's in a protective state. So what ends up happening is whatever you throw in there, I use the white so I can see the fish pick up the bait. But normally, if I'm just gonna throw out there and reel it in like a jig or something like that, I want a more natural color, a more natural looking crawdad color for that kind of fishing. So it will work, but let me tell you something, go with a more natural color, you'll probably pick up more bites. Got him right there, little guy. Little spinnerbait bass. And I mean a little spinnerbait bass. Oh, that was a minnow persuader spinnerbait. There's one question I get quite a bit. Can you catch fish on a spinnerbait, on reaction baits like that, when the water's calm and there's no wind? The answer is yes, you can. But I like to throw it when you have low light conditions, early in the morning, later in the evening, and it works a lot better for me when you have a little bit of low light conditions or cloudy conditions. With calm water, you can still catch them on a spinnerbait. Here's another question I get asked. What blade style should I throw in muddy water versus clear water? Well, I'll tell you this, in muddy water, I like a Colorado blade. You get maximum vibration out of a Colorado blade, and I like gold. Gold has a good flash to it, but the maximum vibration is what you want in muddy water. That Colorado blade offers that. With a willow leaf in clear water, I like that because you get maximum flash. And I'll tell you, it doesn't have the vibration. The willow leaves don't have the vibration that the Colorado blade does. But for my money, I go to muddy water, I'm going with a Colorado blade. Got it. Got that one that time on that jig. Yeah. That's a good jig fish right there. Solid jig fish, Rainbow Lake bass. Ooh, come on, I barely got you hooked. I don't want you coming off. Yeah. Look at that fish, folks. Right in the corner of the mouth. Rock fishing. You know, that's something that a lot of people get away from sometimes in a real weedy lake like what we have here. That's sometimes what you have to do to catch some of these fish, is to get up in the rocks and bump a jig down. Now, the thing is when you're in isn't that a beautiful fish? Fat footballs here at Rainbow Lake. Let's put him back. It's hard to find bare spots, but when you can find them, you can see the rocks going down. You've got maybe a couple of feet off the rocks that's good, the rest of it's weeds. But man, if you can get a jig in there sometimes, you can catch some of those big fish hanging right on the inside of between the rock and the weed. They're using it as a channel. And so you can catch them doing that. That's what I love about being able to see so well in this lake too, is the fact that I can actually watch these fish roaming up and down using that channel. You know, you can see them roaming up and down. So you can throw up in front of them with a bait or a Cinco or a lizard or a jig and catch these fish. Hey folks, for my tip of the week, one thing that's really important is to always match your rod with the lure that you're throwing. If you're throwing a jig or a Texas rigged worm, I always like to use a heavy action rod, something that's got a lot of backbone to it and a little bit stiffer tip. And the reason for that is you can feel it really coming across the bottom really good, and your rod tip's not flexing, and when that bass hits, you got plenty of backbone to be able to stick a real thick hook inside the bass's jaw. Now spinnerbaits, you know, I like to use a medium heavy rod. You still have a big hook on that spinnerbait, so you need to get that big meaty hook through that jaw of the fish. Now when I'm throwing stuff like drop shots or I'm throwing crankbaits, I'll go to a softer tip. The reason for that is when you're using treble hooks or you're using small tiny hooks, you need a lot more flex action in that rod, let me tell you, so you don't lose the fish, because if you put a lot of muscle to the fish and the rod doesn't bend, you'll tear that little tiny hook out of the fish. But if you match the rod with the lures that you're using, you'll put a lot more fish in the boat. Hey folks, during the post spawn, and when the fish are actually watching fry and you see the little tiny blips up by trees and by brush piles and reeds and things like that, a lot of times you can take, this is why I designed this color bait right here. It looks like a bluegill. This is the Rio Rico. It's got a little blue, a little green in it. It's got a great hue to it when you're looking at it from underneath. It's got a little clear underneath it. But what makes this bait so great is they think this is a bluegill in the area. And what you do is you take this particular bait, you try not to move it a bunch. You know how we normally throw these out there and pop it, or, you know, bring it back to you? What you try to do is put it in the spot and make it shimmy, make it shiver just a little bit. And I'll tell you what, if any of those bass think anything's going after their fry, they just come busting out of them trees and they blast this bait. It's a good bait to throw the Rio Rico during the post spawn. One big question I always get asked is, how do I get started in tournament fishing? I'll tell you what, I'll tell you how I did it, and I think it's the smart way to do it. And I think I could have even been a little bit smarter. But the bottom line is, you start with your little club tournaments, your little 10, 15, 20 boat tournaments around your neighborhood on lakes that you're used to fishing. And you become good on those. You start taking the top two, first place, a lot of first places. When you do that, you could move on. And the other thing that's really important to remember, and today we have all this available to us, is internet helps you learn a lot more. Plus, you know, go as a non-boater before you ever go as a boater. Because I'll tell you what, you'll learn something from these pros. There's always something to be learned, and it turns that learning curve real quick. And of course, the other thing is, don't be afraid to take a guide trip. And I can tell you right now, the Arizona Fishing Guides, they're the guys to go with. They fish professionally. You got Josh Bertrand Scooter winning tournaments. They'll show you what it takes, and they'll help you get started as well. So you've got all kinds of avenues to help you get started in tournament fishing. But I strongly suggest you start small and work your way up. Don't work your way up and hope you're gonna hang, because I'm telling you, professional bass fishermen are exactly what they are, professional bass fishermen. They've been around the block, and they know how to catch these fish. Perfect cast, perfect cast. Little roll cast in there. Got him. Oh man, we caught that one right under the chin when he went for that. That's what happens sometimes. Good old jig fish, when you see the fish dart for your bait. And in the cloud cover, it was tough to see. Look at the size of that fish, beautiful fish. Those are definitely fish we gotta throw back, even in tournaments. That happens once in a while. What ends up happening is when you see a fish, which we just found on a bed, threw my jig up in there, and what happens a lot of times, the fish will go up there and flare on the bait really hard, and you think he's biting it, and you set the hook, and then you get him right up underneath the chin. In tournament fishing, that is absolutely the most horrifying thing that can happen as a tournament sight fisherman. Is you got to throw those fish back. You can't even weigh those fish in. But I'll tell you what, that little persuader jig, he was going after it pretty hard. And there's a lot of fish that go after jigs, and it's just that heavy weight sitting on the bottom. That's one of the reasons I've always liked that big crawl with the big, you know, weight on the front of it, you know, something heavy, so it really thumps the bottom of a bed. And of course, white crawl, we would have seen him a lot better whether he would have taken it or not. But I'll tell you what, between getting in between the weeds and the rocks, doing a little bed fishing here in May, it's a lot of fun at Rainbow Lake. You know, there's not a big population of fish here by no means as far as bass go, but there's still a few here. Our bass club comes out, we have a lot of fun. And it can be feast or famine for sure, but it's sure a lot of fun on this lake, and it's where I learned my ABCs of bass fishing. So I like to come here once in a while and just see what's going on. Thanks for joining us on the lake today. And I'll tell you what, hopefully a few of those questions and answers we did for you today will help you in your next fishing venture. Till next time, I'm Johnny Johnson. Now, see, that's what I'm talking about, folks.